Hello, viewers. This is the Elbows Down MotoGP podcast. Thanks for tuning in. This is a bit of a Christmas New Year special. Last week we weren't on air, and the reason for that was Alex was exceptionally under the weather, and he is better now. But unfortunately, this morning he has had to attend a family emergency. He can't be with us, but we have a guest on, a big podcast friend of ours who most will know as Grassroots Grand Prix. How are you, Ryan?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, good. Not too bad. Too bad that in between period of Christmas and New Year, you forget what day it is. But yeah, I'm all right. I've got a few.
To be fair, we work the entire period, so it doesn't really make any difference to
I
us.
really,
Yeah.
I've been working in between, but yeah, it's a weird time of year. Happy time of year if you celebrate Christmas, folks. Anyway, this week, me and Mr. Grassroots Grand Prix here will be talking about tracks to be and not to be of MotoGP. Now, this sport has gone to some absolute banging tracks that it will no longer go to, and sometimes some of them might come back one day, depending on alterations of runoff areas and or facilities. I mean, before we go into the ones we've sort of picked out, Ryan, and obviously I'm using Alex's ones as well because he can't be here today. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of wish we, what track comes to mind? Think wish we went there again.
To be honest, it's coming back, but Bruno's the obvious one because it's big, wide, and fast, isn't it? And as a general rule of thumb, if it's a wide track where there's lots of fast corners, that's my dogs. I apologise.
All right. Most viewers, almost all viewers love dogs. We're all with dogs. It's fine. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so basically any track that's big, wide, and flowing generally creates good racing. So from memory, the track surface there used to be just chew tires, didn't it? But I think they've had a resurface. So that'll be interesting to see what it's like with the resurface. But that to me is pretty close to what a track should look like. So no, that's definitely one that is great that it's coming back. I think quite a lot of the tracks that have disappeared, we'll probably talk about it more later, is say at Donington Park. I do think the bikes have outgrown a lot of these tracks, like Donington. So I think quite a lot of the tracks that it doesn't go to anymore, the bikes are probably too big and too fast for now anyway. So for as much as the racing was great 20 years ago, probably they wouldn't be that good anymore. Whereas, as we said with Bruno, it's massive, isn't it? So I think it'll actually suit the bikes pretty well.
Yeah, I mean Bruno. I mean, you mentioned Bruno. Might as well do Bruno now because that's a track that's coming back anyway. We know it is. I've been before. It's never had a runoff area issue, has it? That's never been an issue. It's definitely wide enough. They just needed money for resurfacing, and obviously new owners now. So that is not an issue. And I think it's great news. I mean, having tracks like Brno, Assen, Mugello, Jerez, these are tracks that are biblical to this calendar, and they have to be there. I mean, yeah, the Abraham family who used to own it did a great job, which is obviously the money was not no longer available there. We're ready to resurface this track, it just had to happen. It's a shame we haven't actually had it now since 2020. That was the COVID season. Brad Binder won that race actually, his first MotoGP win. He's had two. But yes, Brad Binder won that race to everyone's shock and horror. But what a track! I mean, we're still debating where to fly to now for next year. But guys, go to Brno if you don't know where to go next year. If you're one of the people who want to sack Silverstone off completely, I get it, and I'll still probably go anyway. Is Brno. Go to Brno because it's a cheap country, great beer, great atmosphere. People from Holland, Germany, Hungary, everywhere, Austria will go to Brno. It's a brilliant track. But yeah, I mean, I've written here as well that the financial struggles were the only reason. If you look at all the runoffs of all the tracks that aren't on the calendar anymore, Brno is not an issue. So safety, and maybe the pits could do with a lick of paint by now. It's still a long enough pit lane. That's not an issue, and that's why it's quite an easy one to reintroduce the calendar. It's just obviously the hosting fee as well comes into it. That's all settled now. And do you know what? I think you must have seen as well, right? I'm pretty sure it was the Prime Minister of Czech Republic was at the meeting, the press conference with Carmelo Espeleta. So they take it very, very seriously. I don't think you see that in this country. So yeah, it's obviously a massive national event and important for the Czech Republic. And what a track! Just they're not really chicanes, are they? They're just long S bends. There's about 4 different long S bends at Brno, and it just encourages overtakes, and then you can have different lines for good exit speed towards the next one. It's just a joyous track, and I think it's one of the best they go to. I mean, people speak about Mugello, Assen for Le Mans for atmosphere, and obviously Phillip Island for outright perfect track. But I think Brno has always been a bit underrated. I don't know if you feel the same way, but yeah, it's close to my heart, definitely. Even going one bloody time. But yeah, it's coming back. We know that for sure now. I don't think it's going to be like Hungary next year, is it, right?
Where... No, to be fair, one thing that's quite good about, say, the Czech Grand Prix is they sort of default become like the Central European type round in a way, so that, as you said about all the traveling fans from different countries, so it's pretty good that you get all of the different people go there from different parts of Europe. So no, I can absolutely see why you go to that one. Also, when you're saying about the facilities, because it's sort of so banked, isn't it? You don't really need all the grandstands and stuff quite so much there, because from memory, looking at the
and that, yeah, you're right. The banks on the exit corners are there. You don't need stands at Brno, really. I mean, there's one in the main, two actually, the main start and finish straight, which is understandable because actually I've walked down there and it's flat, so you would need grandstands at the start finish. But that, as you said, that's it. Toilets maybe, again, it was 10 years ago when I went. Not incredible, but yeah, it doesn't need that much apart from the resurfacing, which I'm guessing, guys, is starting now. It has to really. Well, July.
About 12 miles long, isn't it? So they're going to have to get going fairly quickly.
Got his track, but no, it'll cost them up to, I believe, 6 million. I'm guessing. I don't know what I'm talking about, but it's definitely in the 7 figures, guys, massively. But yeah, the facilities aren't an issue, as you said. Naturally, there's banks everywhere, which is something Silverstone doesn't have. Although I tend to defend that track. But yeah, the sweeping S bends does create usually great racing. We've had some processions at Brno, haven't we? 1 or 2, but it tends to not be like that.
It's also quite liable to throw up a wet race as well, isn't it? That's always a possibility there. Was it because I'm right in saying it was the year where McPhee and Crutchlow both won on the same day, didn't they? I think.
2016.
Pardon?
2016, Crutchlow won the Czech Grand Prix for LCR Honda, didn't he?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure McPhee won.
He's won it, Brno. I'm just trying to remember. It's the same year. It could well be,
I think it was, because I'm sure they were both wet. Was it because Crutchlow gambled on tyres, didn't he? Yeah. Did he gamble on the compound or something from memory?
I'm trying to remember, but he won by a hell of a margin.
Yeah, he was basically the only rider with it. So I seem to remember Jack Miller saying to him that if he didn't pick the either soft or hard compound, he was going to punch him. So he picked the one that Jack wanted him to, and he won. So yeah, that's all. I just remember there was a bit of a tyre gamble with it, and he gambled correctly, basically. Because McPhee nearly launched himself over the handlebars, I think, as well when he won.
Yes, he did have a hot near high side, and I think coming out the third to last corner, I recall. But yeah, you're right. It can rain there just as easily as it can rain in Le Mans, and that can happen when it's easy. My dad and my uncle were there this year, and they were saying it's red hot, and I said, "You don't know how lucky you are, because at Le Mans it can be an absolute washout, and when it rains there, it's miserable." Apparently, so yeah. So bring raincoats to Brno, folks, because you never know what's going to happen. We certainly will be. But yeah, I mean, you wanted to talk about Nürburgring, didn't you, Brian? I mean, obviously, the current Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit, not the Nordschleife, you'll never ever homologate that for MotoGP in a million years. But yeah, Nürburgring, what was the primary reason for that popping in your head first, Brian? Because that is a good track and they've got high curves and it's very hilly, isn't it?
Yeah, to be honest, I just sort of one from the asset. You can debate, as I said before, you can debate certain tracks, but knowing the runoff areas, etc., a lot of them, there's no point talking about them because they just won't ever be homologated. Whereas, given that's F1 grade, you would imagine that it's got to be pretty close to being signed off for MotoGP already. They still run the IDM Superbikes, the German Superbike series there. I think was it about 97 or something was the last time they had a Grand Prix, but the
Yeah, around it was a late 90s. They haven't been, they've been to Saxon
yeah,
since, haven't
but
they?
as I said before, like fast flowing tracks generally work in my opinion, and sort of if you the spoon curve right at the bottom of the hill, so to speak,
Yeah.
that entire run back up the hill is all pretty fast until you get to the last corner.
Yeah.
So to me, that in my head looks like a track where you get good racing, and then obviously the straight is like the pit straight, long straight, downhill, hard braking, hairpin. Again, that should probably work for good racing as well. So to me,
So
that's a track that probably isn't a million miles away from being homologated already. And I just think it would produce good racing, especially Motor 3. I know Motor 3 is good everywhere, but to me, that looks like a track that would produce good racing. I imagine financially it'd be the issue because they struggle with them with the F1 every season. But as I said, that's one I'd like to see for certain.
yeah, that's quite a niche one as well because not people just go to the stereotypical ones when you think of an old GP circuit, MotoGP circuit. But when you think of the spoon curve and then the Michael Schumacher S is uphill
Yeah.
fast, and then you've got another series of S bends, and then down the hill to a very very fast kink at Nurburgring. Before that chicane near the end, is a very very fast right, isn't there? And
Yes, very fast. Yeah.
very very fast right, and that's just a kink in an F1 car, but on a bike it's a full corner. And I think some bikes could be flat. It wouldn't be flat out now in MotoGP. I don't think. I could be wrong because the approach speed would be so much greater. I think I recall hearing Shaky Shane Byrne. I think he was saying that was his favourite corner. I think he said about once in your career you'll take it flat, maybe. But yeah, good track, good choice. And I think yeah, but the thing is, would you have two German Grand Prix or would you have Saxon fight for it and a budget thing be a mess that? But yeah, I think it's actually as a whole track, it's probably better than Saxon. And the reason I say that is because it's very very left hand orientated section rig, and a lot of it is slow. First half of the lap is very very stop and start, and it's only
And
the
it's all
second half
one
of the lap.
line as well, isn't it?
Yeah, the second half of the lap is fantastic. Yes, but as a whole, the Nurburgring one. The only thing is with the Nurburgring, right? The first corner, it used to be a nice fast chicane, a very natural right left. But in like 2001 or 2002, they changed it to make the loop for F1, and so that first section now is a bit messy for bikes, but it'd be it would break up groups maybe. But yeah, I like that choice because I don't
To
think many people
be
thought of that.
to be fair, they still have a chicane for the where they run the Nürburgring 24-hour car race. They still have a chicane variant. Whether they could actually use the chicane variant for the bikes,
You'd have to make your own one because that's very.
that's really
I mean,
it's
I've got saying
Najimy, isn't it?
on Gran Turismo 7, the endurance layout they use that, right? So
Yeah,
but it's just basically it's the first corner and then it's a tire wall for the chicane. It's a bit of a messy sort of setup. You'd have to have a different one for GP, but yes, technically you can still do the old chicane.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, good one. So moving on to Spa, we need to keep this rolling, so we're not. It's easy for us to get carried away with these awesome old tracks. Spa. Now, I did a lot of homework on this because we all jumped to the conclusion, and many people who work in MotoGP or watch MotoGP or riders have said it's just too dangerous. However, if you really look at all the runoff areas now, the current runoff areas since was it 2021, they had revamped the exit of La Source and the exit of Eau Rouge and turn 10 and 11. I think Huon, that fast left downhill, that already had enough. Longchamp, the fast right near the end of the lap, that's been extended runoff. It's all pretty much decent now. The If you had to nitpick it's Spa, if you look at the runoff just at Radion, right at the tip of Eau Rouge, the right hand uphill, it's still probably not enough for the approach speed that the Grand Prix bike can get up there, and it's just tarmac runoff. What are your thoughts on that? Because obviously we both watched recently some videos, folks, and definitely go and do this. Go and watch the EWC, the Endurance World Championship, the sports bike, superbike based endurance championship, and they have a round there at Spa. And if you just watch the first couple of laps, the runoff is good enough. The runoff is good enough. It's just that obviously you've got to imagine a MotoGP bike is going to go 5 seconds a lap faster, probably than them. What are your thoughts on Spa, current Spa?
But they probably, to me, they've actually ruined it with the amount. I think the runoff now is ludicrous in places to the point where I actually think the runoff makes it more dangerous because the I know this sounds backwards, but I think for you to be safe, there has to be an element of risk, and they've made it so much runoff orientated that it appear there's almost like a false security blanket with some of it. So like the when you go through the Blanchimont, for example, people are just taking that so much faster, especially if you ever watch car racing from there. They're taking it so much faster than they would do because they know they've got the runoff area there. Sort of. So to me, I'm not a big fan of just whacking 4 miles of runoff everywhere. I'm not necessarily in certain points it absolutely is the right thing to do, but the blanket concept of just tarmac everything that will make it safe, I don't agree with that it's always the right answer. For example, like I actually think Eau Rouge is more dangerous, especially from a car point of view, with
Really?
that how they've made that runoff now, because you've got people trying to go 2-3 wide through Eau Rouge because you've got the runoff, which is often leading to these crashes. So I think it's at I think it would be safe enough. Well, not necessarily safe enough, but I can see why it would be homologated for MotoGP. But as I said, I'm not a fan of just throw it tarmac at everything. That's not really my cup of tea. But the the World Endurance one I watched, it was pretty good from round there. So I think again, it's got enough flowing stuff, etc., for MotoGP to be pretty exciting, I'd imagine.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Yeah, it's going to be a long lap though, if that ever happens. Very long lap.
Yeah, and I mean the Motor 3 engine, I'd feel sorry for that after a race distance. Because that would just have the absolute nuts revved out of it, wouldn't it?
The run, especially the run from La Source all the way through Rouge and then the Camel Straight, and then
Yeah.
from Stavolo all the way to the bus stop. More or less flat out. I'll tell you what, yeah, actually, when you're seeing a group of 10 Motor 3 bikes going through Stavolo and all the way through Blanchimont,
As I said, it's a
it would be
strange one.
incredible viewing, though. What incredible viewing it would be. But yeah, I know what you're saying with this horse security. Maybe a hint of that.
As I said, my opinion is
Some
since they
gravel.
for because obviously it's mainly a car track. I think since they've made the changes to El Rouge, that is significantly more dangerous because of adding the runoff. Because I just think it changes the way that you race the corner, and that then makes it more dangerous.
Maybe with the younger classes potentially, but don't forget.
Even GT racing, you see him go free wide for Eau Rouge, and you just shouldn't do that
You
because
know, is it Antoine Hubert who died at Rouge in F2 in
yes,
2018? Now that was before they moved it over. But like, so let's say Rouge coming through this way.
yeah,
Then after that, a couple of years later, they made the run off because someone clipped the curb on the inside at top radio, and they've moved it like another 50 yards deeper, so you wouldn't clip that now. So you could argue that's another process of elimination, and that bit can't that type of accident can't happen as easily now. But the thing is, if you have all tarmac runoff, it won't slow down a bike barrel rolling. You need half of the runoff area now for bikes to be gravel,
yeah.
so it digs in. And you don't have that at Erosion Radion, and you don't have it at Lake Coombe, I think they call it. But then that's a much slower approach, to be fair. You definitely need it at Blanchimont because that would be 160 mile an hour approach, and you'd probably tip it in at 140. And if you took the front there, that's going to go all the way to the fence and go into the forest after the runoff at Blanchimont is it's I think it's raised. I don't know if it's
It's
a bit of a
almost a
drop after
cliff
that.
on the back. I think it's a cliff drop down, I think.
You
Yeah.
can't extend it that much further. So yeah, I think I mean the likes of Loris Caparossi or Incini or whoever goes flies away now and looks at this. I'm sure they're looking at it. But a lot of these changes were made so that MotoGP so they could attract two Grand Prix. They already have one Grand Prix. They got EWC going, and they changed. Don't forget. So after Lake Q, you've got turn 10 and 11. Now they changed. The corner before Puon. There's a straight. Now
Yeah, they've added the extra it's a what's the word? They've added an extra
basically the
left hander,
corner,
haven't they? So it's not as close to the tyre wall.
exactly that.
Yeah.
So the F1 track now acts as runoff, if you like. So where the F1 corner turn 10, MotoGP bikes turn earlier, so the old F1 track is more runoff for the bikes. So actually, they've done more or less all you can do to attract. You can't do any more to attract MotoGP. So one day, folks, I know we all love Spa. One day, who knows, maybe, but I wouldn't hold your breath on that one. I don't know if money would be an issue. That's another conversation, and it depends, promoters and the governments and whatnot who gets involved with that.
They're another one that always struggle financially for the F1. So
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. First, another.
yeah.
But yeah, we've talked about Bruno. What I'm really excited about is the Ayrton Senna track, the Autodrome International Ayrton Senna. I don't know how to pronounce Guanaya in Brazil. That is going to be wrong, folks. I keep saying it right. I said it right the other day, and I can't keep saying it right now, unfortunately. For 2026, we've got this new track confirmed, and it's been around since the early 70s, actually, Ryan, but it's a really good track. It just needs a lick of paint, the new Brazilian track. For this is confirmed, by the way, folks. You've probably read about it. And you were saying earlier on, weren't you, that you've seen some stock car racing there. If you YouTube, folks, and search Autodrome Ayrton Senna, this track is actually quite good for bikes. It's not just a car track, and there's a lot of fast flowing corners. The lap record is held by an S1000 R. You can watch the lap record on board lap. I recommend you doing so because there's a lot of corners that remind us. There's near the end of the lap reminds me of the new Nürburgring. Maybe it's just the grass or something. I don't know. Turn 3 is a downhill right hander like that kink at the Nürburgring, and then you've got bits like Snetterton when it's just sort of your stereotypical 90-degree infield area corners. But there's nowhere for anyone to sit apart from the start and finish. Really, they're going to have to look at that. What were your thoughts when you looked at some of this and then went back and looked? Thought, MotoGP are going there now. They need to change this, change that. Anything in your head other than maybe facilities?
The coverage I've watched, basically, it's one of the main tracks they use for the Brazilian Pro Stock Car Series, which is basically a bit of a retirement home for retired F1 South American drivers. But basically, from the footage I've seen on that, it hasn't really ever shown much of the facilities, so it's hard to sort of comment. The pits certainly look quite tired.
Yeah.
So I imagine they would need a new pit complex, would be a gut feeling. But the actual layout, I think, will be really good because there's plenty of fast flowing corners, and as you said, then they've got like the more nadgery bit in the middle, so to speak. But I think going from the last corners, sort of I'm gonna guess it's gonna be around third gear, is it? I'd say on a bike.
The last corner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would give it take. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so they're going to be coming onto the main straight quite fast, and it's another fast bend for the first corner. So I think it will produce good racing.
Yeah, so do I.
It wasn't a track I'd actually if they said where are they going to go to in Brazil, that hadn't crossed my mind. But when it was announced, I did think, oh, I know that'll be pretty cool. So yeah, I imagine it'll be pretty good value. The car racing there generally produces good racing. Not that they're normally exactly the same, if that makes sense. But as I said, I think that'll be a good addition. And as a general rule, the Brazilians do back. If they get an event, they do support it, don't they? So I imagine it'll be a pretty good atmosphere.
Well, it'll be timed as well. I mean, it all being well with Diogo Moreira as well.
Yeah,
They'll have someone to cheer on in 2026, and he'll probably still be Moto2 by then, unless he dominates and gets a sneaky ride next year. It doesn't matter. I mean,
and
look,
you'd imagine like the Colombians, etc. as well. It's a lot easier to travel to Brazil than it is Europe, so you'll get quite a bit of that as well. I'd guess.
I guess as well. I think it's a good deal they've done there, mate. I think it's clever. We needed Brazil back anyway. It's been 2004, I believe the last race was. Um, that track I was never a massive fan of it anyway. Personally, okay, wasn't the worst track we ever went to, but
Eminently forgettable.
yeah, I mean, when it's sad what it's done to it now, haven't they? It's completely overgrown and gone. But it wasn't my favourite track, definitely not. But this looks good. But it doesn't just need like a paint in the pit lane or rebuilding the pit lane. Curbs needs there's some like exits that where curbs don't exist or they're not
Yeah.
proper free curbs. They're just it's like club circuit vibes. Some of the curbs that'll need changing, but that's probably a cheaper thing for them to do. That needs to happen. There's definitely not even if they did tidy up the pits, that'd be pointless because there's not enough pit boxes. And I know that for Moto2, Moto3, they have the makeshift pits in the tents. They put in the paddock, but it still would be enough. They need to have a new pit building, I think. Which I think, if Brazilian government get involved or there's a good promoter or sponsor, fine. But yeah, that's all. That's all really. And cut the grass a bit and make sure the runoff's fine. And you got air fencing, brilliant. And yeah, you'll have a local hero, Diego Moreira, and like you said, the Colombians make the pilgrimage there. And that's actually happening, folks. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Sure, it's not next year really, but then they need time to build things. So yeah,
It's also, to be fair, it links in because 2025 is the debut season of the Road to MotoGP Latin America Talent Cup. So that for the first time, South America's got their own talent cup. So it sort of all looks like Dorna themselves are working towards trying to grow this area. So having the Brazilian rounds, the Argentina will still be on the calendar as well, won't it? Then theoretically, um, so I can't, I'm pretty sure I read something about that Grand Prix might be in doubt, or if I made that up.
uh, I heard. Well, excuse me, I thought I was going to sneeze then, folks. Oh, I did. No. The thing is, there's political issues going on there.
Yeah.
I don't think you made it up. You might have just heard it. There's nothing official, and what is official these days? You could argue maybe Dorna need the South American Grand Prix in case Argentina don't come back. But I actually quite like that track.
I think it's a good track.
Good little track, yeah. It's not bad. It's got a bit of everything as well. But I think I think this could be better. This has the potential to be a better track, honestly. Just as you said, needs a little paint. But hopefully we don't lose Argentina. We have two South American Grand Prix. I think it'd be excellent. And maybe we can lose Aragon. Anyway, that's that's another conversation. Um, Kyle Army. Have you ever had a thought about Kyle Army coming back, or is that something you've not really thought much about?
Not really thought too much about it. I mean, I kind of always think it's a track that maybe is rose tinted glasses on it, if that makes sense.
Maybe when I was writing this, I thought so a little bit. But I do recall, I don't know if you recall, some of the classic 90s Superbike races there. And I mean, yeah, then again, they used to be like Moto3 races. Any track could produce a good World Superbike race in the late 2000s, sorry, late 90s. But yeah, I know what you mean. It has got a nice undulating nature, though, don't you think? Like, so the elevation change is quite high. There's some very, very fast corners. I don't know if you watched any footage of all
Yeah,
Superbike.
no, I've watched quite yeah, like in terms of I've not watched any bike racing there since the World Superbikes that you said, but I've watched car racing since the redevelopment, so
Yes.
like the GT racing. and it hasn't produced the most exciting racing from what I've seen. But again, bikes and cars are different. The last section, so sort of that fast right-handed kink coming down into the sort of a left-handed
Yeah.
hairpin, that to me does look like that has last lap lunge written all over it. So from that point, that particular bit, if they're close enough still by the end of the race, that could be good fun. But yeah, I'm not sure. It wouldn't be one I'd instantly jump out and say yes, that I'd be so excited to see that come again. I certainly wouldn't be disappointed, but I wouldn't be particularly confident in what I was about to watch, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Yeah, it does. I think to me it would be only almost the reverse of Donington Park to a degree, where the first half of the lap is brilliant at Donington, and the second half of the lap is stop and start and can turn it to processional. Whereas Kyle Army for bikes now, as you said, since redevelopment, the first corner is very fast. That's a right hand kink, by the way, folks. No runoff there. Would you need it as a kink? Maybe you could argue not really, but the second corner used to be a downhill, fast left, that plunged down oh, it was very cambered as well. And now, since the redevelopment of Kyle Army, turn two it'll be first gear. It's a hairpin now, and that would be good for like dive bombing and whatnot. But it would stop us. It'd be a bit like it would be very similar to that corner at Kota at the end of the kilometre long straight. And then it stop and starts a bit more, and then you get into the mid part of the Kyle Army lap, and then it gets fast. So it's a reverse of what Donington's like in a way. But yeah, the biggest issue with Kyle Army, even if it gets successful with Liberty, if all that goes through and the sport wants to grow, and then Brad Binder becomes more successful again, and they need a Grand Prix. And I think it'd be brilliant for Brad if they had a Grand Prix there. There is a big issue, and that is runoff everywhere. I've been looking this morning at runoff areas at Kyle Army. There's some corners it's fine, but there's an awful lot where it is not. If you look at the mid half of the lap when they tip it left and then go immediately down, it's almost like a soft corkscrew. There's a left and then a downhill and a sweeper. The runoff is tiny. It's a car track runoff for a lot of this lap. The second to last corner you mentioned before, and that's got enough runoff just before the pits, but the last corner itself has next to nothing, and you cannot extend it anymore, really, because again, it's like Bonchimon, it's far, it's a big cliff almost. So there's too many corners where there's not enough runoff, or you can't make it big enough. I thought I'd mention that because in a lot of people's eyes, it is a bit of a classic. As you said, it could be roasting in glasses. But I mean, I've got one more base on this list, folks, and I think we can all agree it's close to our hearts, and that's Laguna Seca. I mean, what about you? Did you love that track, or is it just a few corners you think people liked? What's your view on Laguna over the years?
Some brilliant moments, i.e., the classic through the corkscrew, overtake through the gravel, etc., etc., interspersed with quite a lot of procession, if that makes sense. So, like, it produced some amazing moments, but then there was also quite a lot that wasn't particularly memorable. I don't think this type of bike that we've got now, whether the regulation change will make that different, I don't see this type of bike producing anything other than a stinker, to be honest, around there. I could be wrong, but I just can't see that would be a good race anymore.
I mean, there's been again, every track's had its processions. And Laguna's definitely had a few. I think it was it 09 where Rossi caught Danny Pedrosa, and it spent the whole race nowhere near and close enough to him. And he got close enough at the last corner and almost passed him, and that was all that race was. The 08 one is the obvious brilliant one. But that was Rossi just knowing that he was nowhere near on single lap pace as fast as Casey and tried to rough him up, which is fine. But not you're never going to get that sort of beautiful scenario where someone can just about be close enough to rough someone up. But there is fast corners there. I think now that we've got Moto 3 and Moto 2, I think they could go there again under California law because there's no two strokes there now. But then again, I say that in 2013 it was Moto3 and Moto2. There wasn't any two strokes then, and it was still MotoGP that went there for the last year where Mark Marquez won. I know it's a brilliant track, but they have continued to keep moving back the wall at Corkscrew and certain other corners. But it is still close. The biggest issue with Laguna Seca, folks, is turn one. And that's because it is an extremely fast left-hand kink. But on a current Grand Prix bike, it's a corner with no runoff at all. There was a fatality there in, I think, 2014 or 15. I could be wrong there, one of those years. Sorry, folks. And it was a start crash, and someone hit the wall and came immediately back on because there's no runoff, and there was a fatality involved. And there is a big hill. There's like a little mountain, isn't there, on the exit of turn one, or while on the outside of turn one. You can't move that back. It would cost them tens of millions of pounds to dig into the earth there just to host MotoGP again. When, to be honest, the attendance of the Circuit of the Americas isn't dreadful. It's not amazing, but it's got every single facility, every different type of corner. And the last couple of years, we've actually not too bad of racing there. I always slagged it off, and then this year, we actually got one of the best Circuit of the Americas races in recent memory, with Acosta, Martin, Pecco, Marquez, and Vinales all knocking spots for each other. So people do mention Laguna. You see it in social media comments now and again. I just don't think it can happen. There is another track that they're building in the States, or it's already built, that would be very suitable for MotoGP. I'm trying to remember the name of it.
I was going to say the other problem with Laguna Seca is I think it's another one where people have moved next to a motor racing track, and now there's awful lot of complaints about noise. So I think they're another track that really struggles on that as well. So I think from that point of view as well, it could be an issue, because I'm pretty sure the local residents have kicked off about noise, etc., there as well. Is it the Ozarks track? Is that the one you're thinking of?
I'm trying to remember, but I think a lot of people have shut it down. And someone's asked them about it. Someone's asked someone who works at the paddock about it. They sort of shut it down because it's just a rumor that we'll go there. But yes, off the top of my head, I can't remember the name of the track. But there is too much. I mean, we got lucky with Kota this year, but you could argue that might have just been because we had a really red hot rookie. The 2024 Ducatis weren't 100% dialed in by that race, so the 23s could still fight them. That makes no odds. It's probably always going to have a permanent early spot on the calendar, so you might get better races there anyway.
To be honest, prior to this year, I'd say I'd happily never watch another race from there ever again. So this year was a bit of I tuned in watching it, expecting to be thoroughly bored, and it was quite a pleasant surprise that it wasn't. So hopefully this year wasn't just a aberration, so to speak. But prior to this year, I can't say that I've ever enjoyed the track. So fingers crossed what happened this year will be more regular, because as a general rule of thumb, it's as boring as dishwater, isn't it?
Yeah, usually. I mean, I think
horrible surface.
Yeah, it's been
far
built
too long.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? It's like in Moto3, you get about 4 laps in practice because it's such a long lap time. It's not. It wouldn't. As I said, if it carries on producing the racing like it did this year, then fair enough, great. But based on all of the years prior to that, it's not a track that I'd normally like. You also had that horrendous Moto3 crash, didn't you, a couple of years back?
At the same time, that kind of crash run could happen anywhere.
Oh no, of course, yeah.
It's on a straight, but yes, it was at that track. Admittedly, I had a thought about this track to be better than MotoGP. You don't have to have the same bloody layout as Formula One. You know, on the long straight, instead of going down
the cut through,
cut through to the last, the last right, to the last 2 lefts. You can have just a much more of a swoopy. You need to slow the bikes down before you get to that very, very long right before the last 2 corners, because you wouldn't have a run off. But the first care shit can go. That's what cuts a lot of the flow of the racing up in the group. So I always bang on about groups. If groups are cut up by very slow corners, and that's what Kota usually does. I know it didn't, ironically, for MotoGP this year. But as Ryan's just said, that's a one-off. So yeah, I mean, a cutaway of that section would be good for Kota. But yeah, that's more or less it for the tracks, folks. I mean, Hungary. We need to speak about Hungary because that's confirmed for next year. Do we really think it's going to happen? Do we really think there's enough runoff? Just Google Altan Park, folks. Yeah, Brian, what's your thought on that?
I mean, if it first glance of looking at it, forget the safety aspect. That's a completely different conversation. It doesn't look like a racetrack that's going to be particular. Ironically, here, it looks like it's going to be absolutely appalling for racing. But it is if it does happen, we might consider going to it on the basis of the part of the country it's in looks absolutely stunning. So we might actually go to time it in with a holiday, so to speak, because of the area looks so pretty. But I wouldn't be going there expecting to see the best Grand Prix I've ever watched. It looks like a go-kart track.
It looks honestly, guys. I mean, Snetterton's got more runoff than that place. Honestly, it's almost like it's ticking off a box for a spot on the calendar. You know, for Dorna, it needs more runoff. It needs a few more stands. Yeah,
and as well,
yeah.
the actual layout just.
It's not the part of the world that's the issue, is it? That's not what I'm saying. It's just the track isn't good enough. It's not up to standard. Sorry, you were going to say?
Yeah, the layout just looks like as I said, the safety is one thing, but I cannot believe that track will produce good racing because everything that produces good racing is wide, flowing, fast tracks, and this is narrow, lots of right angle type corners. It looks, as I said, we are actually considering going, ironically, despite me slating it, but I think it will produce. Motor3 might produce good racing, but Motor3 makes most tracks look pretty good. But Moto2 and MotoGP, I think, will be terrible. And I'll happily eat my words on that if I'm wrong. It's sort of what was the new track they ran? It's completely slipped my mind. World Superbikes this year went to the new venue. In Italy.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, World Supers have gone to a few niche tracks, haven't they? Like what do they call the Czech circuit they use?
Yes.
See, the thing is, I don't know if some of these tracks, I don't know why they're doing it, or some tracks can't afford to host World Superbikes because they're focusing on others, and it's just not popular anymore. So they've got to go to tracks that can benefit from the series.
This track reminds me of the Italian. For some reason, I don't know why, but this reminds me of the Italian circuit that they used this year for the first time in ages.
Yeah.
And
I know which one you mean.
I looked at it and thought that won't be very good. And then the racing to me wasn't particularly good there. At Cremona, that's it, isn't it? The Cremona circuit.
Yeah. I mean, they used to Cremona as well. They used to go to Vallelunga. I don't know if people remember Vallelunga. And that was that was quite a fast track in parts, but that was also really weird at the back end of the track. And yeah, world championship status, not entirely sure. But yeah, I mean, some of these tracks are, as you said, just probably as good in terms of width and up to scratch as this new track in Hungary. I don't think I'm just not convinced. And if it doesn't go ahead, it could be it might not be just these reasons. It might be hosting costs. It could be Loris Capirossi or Cheney turn up, whoever else now, and just say no, that is not enough runoff at turn one, and there's not enough runoff here. I don't think the facilities are too bad. The pit lane looks okay to me. It's not like where they're at the center track in Brazil where it just needs just tweaking here and there. I mean, runoff's fine there, but I hope it works so you can go on holiday, mate. I don't think there's any risk in Bruno not happening, but yeah, hopefully it will go ahead. What about? I mean, we talk about is next year or is it 2026? We're supposed to see what track is it? I'll keep forgetting.
Kazakhstan.
I keep forgetting it, folks, because is it 3 times now? Definitely 2 times being cancelled. I'm thinking 3 times it's been cancelled now. But Kazakhstan, I mean, that track, actually, I'm sorry, that's worse than the Hungarian track. That looks like a go-kart track. Just first gear, second gear, first gear. I don't know if that'll happen anyway, but I mean, I don't know that. I've actually, like many people, given up looking up about that because I'm so convinced, mate, that it won't happen. I don't know what your last thought was on the Afghanistan Grand Prix, but sorry, yeah,
The Kazakhstan one.
Kazakhstan, beg your pardon, folks. The Kazakhstan Grand Prix. What was your last thought on that? Have you given up hope forever, or do you think it might still happen? It could be quite an interesting event, to be fair.
Yeah, sort of. It's on the sort of same pile of was it the finish track they created? Um,
Yeah.
so like, yeah, just one of them. Like, I can't see it happening. Once something's cancelled a certain amount of times, it surely must make it harder and harder and harder each year it doesn't happen. In my head.
Circuit of
Um,
Wales.
Pardon?
Circuit of Wales.
Yeah, do you remember Lake Torrent as well that was meant to host World Superbikes in Northern Ireland?
Yes, yes, do actually. Yeah, that's that.
Yeah, like two tracks where an awful lot of money was spent and not a single spade was ever put in the floor, was it? So, yeah, like,
I think.
yeah,
I think.
there seems to be a lot of tracks made that aren't used, which is quite bizarre.
Well, the Kimi ring was a waste of money in the end. Well, they'll probably do some national, I mean, domestic Finnish motorsport races there. I mean, the first half of that lap looked pretty damn cool, actually. And then again, you had a first gear, really weird first gear section near the end of the lap. I thought that's just going to be so pointless in the MotoGP bike. And then I remember the riders were saying that to the media, and then the owner of the track had said to the media, "Then he just needs to man up." It's like, well, what are you talking about now? If anything, these corners are second and first gear corners. They're saying they're not fast enough. I remember him saying they need to man up. I thought, what? But it didn't matter. It didn't happen anyway. And I can't see. Yeah, I don't think it's on the calendar again. And it hasn't. They haven't said they'll try and have it back again. So
I
yeah,
think the whole point of I think, you know, where they do the economic study before doing a Grand Prix, I think a lot of the economy of the Grand Prix was based on the fact that people from Russia would travel to it. So I think the idea was that a lot of because it's quite close to the border, that you'd get a lot of tourism from Russia to support the Grand Prix. So I think that the fact that that can no longer happen, I think very much kills it on the basis that a lot of the money was meant to be generated through tourism in that way.
yeah, yeah. Good point. I mean, obviously that's not going to happen for a long.
No, so I think if that was the viability of it financially, then I think that's gone for the foreseeable, hasn't it? Basically.
Seeable is the word I would say. Yeah. But at least we get the Brazilian Grand Prix back. We get Bruno back as early as next year. So fingers crossed we do get to see Hungary again. Hungaroring, that's a track we haven't written about, but I actually don't mind that. Again, there's corners at Hungaroring, isn't there? Not on the front off. I'm sick of saying that, but that's a lot of the reason why we can't go to some absolutely stunning tracks. Hungaroring, what do you think about Hungaroring?
Yeah, again, as you said, like there's that fast right hander, isn't there, towards the end of the lap where runoff would be quite a big problem.
Well, Budapest. I mean, it is to be fair, actually, it's probably quite slow for MotoGP, isn't it? There's a lot of chicanes there, and second gear corners and or third gear corners in F1 cars. So that's probably going to be more like second gear, first gear MotoGP bikes.
To be
So
honest, it's not a track I've ever majorly liked for cars, and I don't think I've ever I don't think I've ever seen a bike go round there, but it wouldn't be a car track that would jump out at me as being a bike track, if that makes sense.
no, I think looking at the map, it would probably be just as good to go to the track we're supposed to be going to. So we'll have to wait and see if that does happen. I think that's more or less. I mean, any news you want to speak about, Ryan? About
No, I suppose I think I said before, the what in terms of for next year, he's not really said how bad it is, but Guido Pini has injured himself. Think he was doing flat tracking, I
Yeah,
think I want to say. So yeah, hopefully that's not too bad and he sort of can make the start of next season. He didn't really give any indication on that, but I mean he's a very, very fast rider, so he'll be good to watch next year.
yeah. Watch some of his races this year, and that's a shame, especially when you need to be training for the World Championship level. If he's in a wheelchair now, I mean, hopefully he can be training back on a bike within a month or two, because you'll really need to be at that level. But that is a shame, and so best wishes to him. I think we're all quite depressed, aren't we, Ryan, about this KTM situation? It seems to be getting worse by the day, or certainly worse by the week. And then KTM come back and crush those rumours, saying, no, we are racing. Do you think there's before we go, a real risk of having no MotoGP bikes in the grid next year from KTM, and even a risk of saying goodbye to all the Moto3 teams? I mean, that's an unimaginable feat, especially Moto3, where you'd have 8 Hondas on the grid, and then what's going to happen then? Have you got Dorna talking to Honda? Can you make all these bikes for us, please? We'll make it financially worthwhile. Can you make them before the start of the year? I mean, what a contractual mess it would be for all these teams that use KTM in the lower classes. It would affect Junior GP. It would affect Red Bull rookies, and unless they just keep those bikes separate. What a mess, man. I mean, how realistic is the pull out from racing altogether? Do you think they mean it when they say they can keep going? I mean, obviously, we've got the potential of Red Bull helping out, even Lewis Hamilton. I mean, do you think they have to pull out at the end of this year and they can just scrape through? What are your realistic thoughts?
It's one of them ones where anything I'd say would just be an absolute pie in the sky guess.
Right.
My gut feeling is surely, say for Moto 3 and maybe less of an extent Moto 2, the teams have got the bikes, etc., etc. So surely for Moto 3, they can run all year because the teams have got the bikes. If there's zero development done on those bikes from KTM as a factory, so be it. But teams can develop their own parts anyway. So
Yes, they can.
it,
Yeah.
so to me, the Moto 3, I'm saying this with no factual knowledge. I'd be surprised if that was affected. Like in my head, it shouldn't be a problem. The Perhaps the ironically, it could be where the actual KTM factory teams in Moto 3 could be affected, but the KTM customer ones might
Is
not be
they
because
are.
the KTM customer teams are funding their own racing anyway. They're not relying on KTM. So maybe they could all be fine and the factory KTM might be in trouble. I don't know. Moto 2 would be a similar opinion, I guess, as well. MotoGP is obviously the big that one. If there was no KTM bikes on the MotoGP grid, I'd be a lot less surprised than if there was no KTM's in Moto 3 and Moto 2, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think it's all mutually exclusive just because MotoGP's pulled. I don't think Moto 2 and 3 would be pulled as well. I think they're quite separate things in my head. But
Yeah.
again, I'm just guessing, so I could be well out.
Well, exactly. I mean, there's some financial experts that used to work in that sport that have been expressing their opinions, and some of them are really worrying. And you just think, oh goodness me, it's going to be like 2018, sorry, like 2011, 09/10, and all that when we had like 17, 18 bikes in the grid. But then you'd have to find rides for Acosta Miller, sorry, Acosta Binder, and obviously we've got Bastianini and Vinales.
Then also the cynic in me as well. Now, this is just purely playing devil's advocate from a journalist point of view. A headline of saying, everything will be grand next year doesn't get many clicks, does it? Whereas we're
No,
all screwed, you'll get a few clicks.
you'll get a
So,
read out of it. Yeah.
pardon?
You'll get reads out of it or views. Yeah, yeah, exactly, because it's more an eye catching headline. Uh,
Yeah, and so that might not be the reason why those headlines actually might be 100% genuine, but
Maybe.
there's also a chance that egging it up a little bit in the close season when there's quite frankly nothing to talk about, it gives you quite a lot of stories that otherwise you wouldn't have.
Yes.
So there could be a bit of that in amongst all of this.
Maybe it's an interesting point. I mean, I think that they are in the shit.
Oh,
That is,
that's undeniable. But
that's.
as in,
I mean, the Hamilton rumors. People that really pisses me off. By the way, everyone listening, if people say I don't want that idiot in the sport, I don't like you, he's a woke idiot. You guys can go and yourself because why would you not want someone who can help promote the sport, save a company, save a team? I don't understand the logic in that. I really don't. I think it'd be brilliant if Lewis Hamilton could get involved. If that is as true as his representatives talking to KTM are as true as the source is saying. I think KTM actually said that there had been contact made. I think that's brilliant. If so, I just don't understand why people say otherwise. Regardless if you like him or not, it saves the company. It saves a lot of it.
I mean, it'd be like it's two separate things. Would I fancy going to the pub for a pint with him? Probably not. No. But would it be amazing if he joined the sport in that capacity? Yeah, because the PR, social media, blah blah blah, and the fact that the team would still be on the grid, that's all massively positive. Whether I want to go for a beer with him is besides the point. Like they're separate, aren't they? So to me,
Yeah,
it'd be amazing for the sport if he did.
yeah,
And your views on whether you like him or not, I think, are irrelevant to that.
absolutely relevant. It needs to be kept separate. I mean, there's the Red Bull factor as well. They could buy they could. Well, I don't know if the 2.9 billion or whatever is owed still. But I read today, Alex found a piece of information where 1.1 billion has been found. Um, we just found, well, for lack of a better title, yeah, I think investors have found it, or yeah, the debt collectors have found it. I don't know what's coming. They're selling MV. We know that to sort of give them a mini head start because you're not going to sell MV Gusta for even half a billion, let alone 2.9. So obviously a lot of jobs will be lost. We've already spoken about that on the pod. Really, really sad times, but hopefully Red Bull can help out. That would be brilliant. I think Dietrich Mateschitz, if he was still with us, I think Matt Oxley. I'm not stealing his quote. I'm just saying that he was correct when he said that Mateschitz would have gone for this straight away because he was a real motorsport enthusiast. Obviously, he's not with us anymore. The old Red Bull company boss. So yeah, hopefully they'll still help out. But I think yeah, that would have been potentially more of an easy fix.
The one bit I can't quite get my head around is like we all get skint at times in our day-to-day lives, and there's a point where you look at your bank statement and sort of grimace a little bit. The bit I can't quite get is how have we got to the point where we've waited till 3 billion? Like
Well, this is
it's such huh?
well, it's because they bought these companies, didn't they? Acquired these companies in COVID when they were making enough money because everyone was panic buying motorbikes. Well, not panic buying motorbikes; they had nothing to do.
Yeah,
So
boredom buying.
increased the production and never ever slowed it back down once people were out of lockdowns, which was a mistake. And then while they did that, they started. I mean, they acquired MV and obviously joint ties with CF Motor and whatnot else. So and gas, as we know from a while back, but it's something. Yeah, I can't believe it either. It's done now though, so it's damaged.
They've done a wedge on electric bikes as well, haven't they?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say a wedge, but close to. A lot of these things need. I would love to hear some solid news soon because it's actually quite worrying. I can't imagine having to. What would happen to these riders? Would some riders get kicked off rides in MotoGP? Would you have a Costa kicking out Aldeguer of his ride because Dorna needed to happen and Ducati want Acosta more than you've got Acosta's manager knocking on Ducati. So all we've got is maybe if you guys can bail out Aldeguer out of his $1.5 million contract, whatever it is, maybe that could happen. And what about the other three? Where's Brad Binder going to go? Are they going to kick off Alex Marquez or somewhere else? It's just been an awful mess.
Would there be a point as well where they just say to certain teams, if you can run an extra bike, run an extra bike, and sort of, I mean, from what you've just, pardon?
And maybe Dorna pick up for the bill for the extra logistics for the extra bike or something like that.
Yeah. And like what you've just said there with the contractual situations, like with most things in life, the only winner is the law firms, isn't it? Basically, they're going to be rubbing their hands together because if that did happen, there's just going to be, I mean, that will just be such a mess of trying to untangle. Because I imagine those contracts are pretty definitive, aren't they? Like, there's
Yeah,
not going to be a clause in there saying if a rider we fancy a bit more than you becomes available, we can turf you to one side. I can't imagine any riders signing that contract, are they? So they're going to be wanting quite a lot of cash to get off the seat, aren't they?
I can't imagine it either, mate. But at the same time, I can equally not imagine a championship next year without Pedro Acosta and Brad Binder and Vignale Bastianini. I mean, that'd be bonkers. But let's hope, being on the ground, we don't have to get to that, folks. It is time to wrap up because me and Ryan both have days, and we will be back with Grassroots Grand Prix again before the season starts. We'll talk about the quite promising prospect of British riders in Grand Prix next year and Junior GP and Red Bull Rookies. We'll talk about that in the next month or two. Ryan, thanks again for joining us. Sorry, folks, that Alex couldn't make it. Obviously, he will be back soon. And sorry, by the way, that this new picture is is back to front, but I will sort out my Zoom at some point soon. But Ryan, thanks again, mate. Thanks for taking the time. As always, you're a good friend of this pod, and we'll look forward to hearing from you soon.
No worries. Thank you for having us on.
Pleasure, as always, mate. And folks, we will be on Spotify as well. We're not leaving Spotify; it's YouTube and Spotify simultaneously. So over the next few days, this will obviously be on, and in the next few weeks, we'll have another episode, and then be back to the weekly episodes as we get into January. So thanks for tuning in, folks, and thanks, Ryan. Enjoy and Happy New Year.
Cheers. Have a good one.